Okay, so now we've got another task 2. So discussing both views and giving your opinion. So we need introduction, A side believes, B side believes, my opinion is. Okay, so that should be the general structure. And the topic is about being born with talent or working hard to achieve it. So it's generally believed that some people are born with certain talents, for instance for sport or music, and others are not. It is sometimes claimed that any child can be taught to become a good sports person or musician. Discuss both these views. Okay, so is talent something you have to be born with, or is it talent something that you can learn? So let's look at this candidate. They've got their introduction. There are often argued whether talents are given from birth or learnt by practicing. Okay, so it is often argued. Whether talents are given. I mean, this is fine, but I really don't like the phrase, it is often argued. So a lot of candidates will write, it is argued, many people argue, it can be argued that, and it just feels quite vague. To me, I'm like, who is arguing? Is this a common argument? Is it a good argument? So you can really replace this phrase with something better. So if we're saying, it is often argued whether talents are given from birth or learned by practicing, or you could say something like, a better phrase would, it is an age-old debate whether talents are given from birth or learned by practicing. Okay, so something like this is saying it is an age-old debate. So you're saying, this is like nature versus nurture. So it's something that's been going on for a long time. This would improve your vocabulary score, and it sounds a little bit more specific and more advanced than this very basic phrase that a lot of candidates use. So if this is a phrase you'll find that you use a lot in your essays, it is often argued, many people argued, it can be argued, I would really work on finding other ways, other things you can replace it with. So the next sentence, although some people assert that the talents are given and not by learning, some assert that talents are given and not acquired. To acquire something, you get something, you receive something. They're not acquired by learning. I believe the circumstances and experience after birthing are more important. So birthing, for the verb, means after birthing. So birthing is literally giving birth. So having birth, ing, is like literally the baby is coming out of the mum. So after birthing. So it sounds funny when it's put in a sentence. So after birthing. We would usually use birthing to describe like an animal on a farm. So I'm going to be busy next week because the cows are birthing, or I attended a birthing goat or something rather than a human. So it should be, I believe, the circumstances and experience after, it should just be birth, are more important. Okay, so good things about this introduction. I like that they've given me their opinion. So they're going to argue that it doesn't matter what you were born with, it's more important to practice and get experience afterwards. So I think that as an introduction, you could extend it. You could give me a little bit more detail about what specifically you're going to talk about in your other paragraphs. Overall, not too bad. So look at the first paragraph. To begin with, good link, nice start. Some people might say that the given ability from birth cannot be compared with any other conditions such as practicing or learning, and there are some reasons that make them believe their own thesis. Okay, so to begin with, some people might say that given ability from birth cannot be compared with any other conditions such as practicing or learning. This is what is odd to me. Compared with any other conditions such as practicing or learning. And practicing or learning isn't really a condition. So if you're comparing with a condition, for example, a condition is like lights on or lights off. So I'm going to compare whether people can do the test better under different conditions, with the lights on or with the lights off. So compared with any other conditions such as practicing or learning, it doesn't make clear sense to me, and the meaning of this sentence is a little bit unclear. But I get the gist of what the candidate's trying to say, but they've not expressed it in a very clear way. So then they say, and there are some reasons that make them believe their own thesis. A thesis, usually in British English, we call it's something we would call like maybe it's like a dissertation. So when I say thesis, it makes me think of your like a long written essay. And I know that we say thesis statement, as in your argument statement, but in this context, it makes me think of writing a long essay, which doesn't really fit. So there are some reasons that make them believe their own argument would be much better. Their own argument, their own opinion. I can see that the candidate, again, is trying to include some more high-level vocabulary by trying to go for thesis, but they've not really successfully pulled it off, because in this context, we couldn't really say thesis. You don't believe your own thesis when you're debating someone. So let's say, first of all, a lot of geniuses show their talent since they were really young. For example, Mozart was told that he is born to be an artist, that he was told that he was born, so make sure to keep your tenses consistent, was told that he was born to be an artist, because he played the piano with amazing skills, even when he was a kid. Secondly, people consider the field of art is hardly be taught, since there is a part that we can only feel it out spirits. Okay, so this is not a very well constructed sentence, and the meaning is a little bit unclear. There is a part that we can only feel out. So there is feel it out spirits is not a phrase that we would use in English. It doesn't really make sense. So we would say something like, since there is a part that we can only do, and then we would sort of say intuitively, or, you know, there is a part that we can only do with sort of like an artistic, you know, soul, or through natural talent or inspiration. You could phrase it any of those kind of ways, but feel it out spirits doesn't make sense. So in other words, although they can learn some technical methods or the popular skills, this aesthetic sense cannot be made by learning or practicing. Okay, so that kind of makes more sense, this aesthetic sense. Okay, that sort of makes more sense to me. So I kind of get what their argument is trying to do. They're sort of arguing that geniuses, and they give an example of Mozart. You're a genius, you're born, you show your genius early. And then they sort of talk about, you know, the fact that you need to have something artistic about you for artistic fields. What I would really like to see this candidate discuss is more sort of arguing against the fact that you can practice or learn. So why can't I learn to play the piano as well as Mozart? So Mozart was born and able to play the piano amazingly, but why couldn't I practice so much that I become as good as Mozart? That's really what you need to be explaining to me. So you could say, you know, or, you know, the other, because I would counter argument, I'd say, sure, Mozart was really good at piano when he was born, but he also had a lot of lessons and he also practiced a lot. So you need to sort of be persuading me that what Mozart had couldn't be taught to him. And that's kind of what they try to do here. But so rather than saying secondly, I would link these two arguments together and sort of, you know, counter argue and say, you know, yes, of course, Mozart did also have a lot of piano lessons and he practiced every day. However, he had this artistic soul. He was able to express himself through music intuitively in a way that is very difficult to teach. So even though he had lessons to learn technical piano methods or technical composition, he had an artistic spirit and this aesthetic sense that that's the reason his music is so timeless and so special compared to other composers at the time. So what he argues, he had a genius that made Mozart's music so special that we still listen and play it now. You know, kind of like Shakespeare. Lots of people have written plays, but the reason Shakespeare's are so special is because even though he was technically good at writing a play, he had an artistic spirit, which meant his work was more special and timeless. So that's really what I would like to see this candidate arguing more here. Their argument is a little bit basic. It needs to be extended a little bit more. But overall, not bad, pretty good. They have some good grammar. They use some good complex sentences. They organize the information quite logically. Even though some of their phrasing is a little bit unclear, I can see that they're trying to use some good vocabulary. So overall, not too bad. So then we go on to the next paragraph. So however, although the people believe a talent just be given when they are born, the others consider this talent can be taught and took by after circumstances, as there are some facts that talents can be learned after being born. Okay, first of all, your sentence is too long. I don't know if you heard it as I was reading it. I was waiting for the sentence to end and it didn't end. So it was difficult for me to read. So first up, I'm like, this sentence is too long and we either need to break it up into 2 sentences or use some punctuation to let the reader know that you finished the first half of the sentence. So, however, although some people, not everyone, some people believe talent is just given at birth, the others, who are the others? Other people consider that talent can be taught and took by, improved, maybe they mean, and improved by circumstances. As there are some facts that talents can be learned after, as there is some, I think, evidence that talents can be learned after being born. Okay, so that makes more sense to me. That makes more logical sense to me as a sentence. Okay, so let me go. First of all, there are many cases of geniuses who prove that talent can be taught by practicing. In other words, if you do not put your efforts to develop your ability, the talent given from birth would be useless. Okay, there are many cases of geniuses. Okay, give me an example. For example, I don't know, like a really famous ice skater. They had to practice a lot, even though they were naturally talented at it. So they need to put an example here, and then in other words, if you don't put efforts to develop your ability, the talent given from birth would be useless. They need to extend. I don't know what happened in this paragraph. This is too short. Too short, especially compared to the other paragraph, which was a bit longer. So what this makes me think is the candidate realized that they were running out of time. They spent too much on the first paragraph. They didn't leave enough time for the second paragraph. It feels too short for me, especially because in the other paragraph, they give 2 reasons. They go firstly, secondly, and then in this one, they say first of all, and then they don't follow up with a second of all. So that really makes it obvious to the examiner that you didn't have time, or you forgot, or you just used first of all, like on autopilot, and you didn't realize that you then need to have a second of all. So that's like a trick. Some candidates will always say like first and then never follow that up with secondly or finally. So I'm just curious to know whether what happened in terms of timing, or whether this was a mistake, or whether there was more that this candidate wanted to write and they didn't have time to do it. So I feel that that's going to be the issue here. So I think this is going to affect their coherence and their task achievement, because it feels unfinished. It feels like they didn't spend enough time on it, or they didn't really think carefully about what they were going to write. And then also some of the grammar is going to be a little bit odd, because this whole first sentence was odd for me to read, and I had to improve it to make it more understandable. So those are the sort of 2 main issues here. So we move on to the conclusion. They need to give their opinion. In conclusion, although some people assert that talents, especially in the field of art, could not be taught, there were clear reasons that prove that efforts can override. Okay, in conclusion, although some people assert that talents, especially in the field of art, could not be taught, we don't need a comma, so get rid of that one. There were clear reasons that prove that efforts can override the talents given through birth, at birth, given, you could say given genetically, inherited, something like that. Hence, I believe children can be taught to become a person, to become people who are outstanding in their field. Okay, so finally we've got an opinion. So they've left it right to the end to state their opinion. This would have been more helpful if this had been at the start of the paragraph and they then had explained it more. So it's like, why do you believe that? So they've not given their sort of reason. They've said here there were clear reasons that prove efforts can override the talents given. You've not actually given me any of your reasons. You've not actually given me any of your examples. If we look at the paragraph where that should have been, all they said is there are many cases of geniuses who they got their talent through practicing. But you've not actually given me an example of that. So you've just stated something as a fact and you've not backed it up and you've not explained it. And then you say in your conclusion there were clear reasons, and I'm like, were there really? Because you didn't tell me what they were, really, in that other paragraph. And then you said, so basically they've said, it's almost exactly the same as the question sentence. Some people think you're born with it, some people think you can teach it, therefore I believe that you can be taught to become a genius. But what they've not actually done in this essay is they've not actually convinced me why. They've not explained themselves, they've not extended their reasoning to show me why. So that's what would have been really crucial in the third paragraph, is give me a specific example and explain more about the fact that you can be born with talent, but you need to practice to nurture it. Or in terms of sports, you can be born with a body that's predisposed to be good at a sport, but you need to practice to become really good at it. For example, Michael Phelps, the swimmer, is born with like huge hands and really tall, but he needed to do a lot of training to get the skills needed to swim. So something like that would have been helpful. So it just makes the conclusion quite flat, and it just feels like you're repeating both the question and the introduction in a slightly different way, which I think is a shame for the sort of task achievement. So for this candidate task achievement, I thought was reasonably fine, but they needed to explain more. So I would give a 5.5, and I would mainly sort of ask them to look back at the paragraph 3. They need to explain and extend. If they need to explain, they need to extend, and you need to give me more examples. Okay, and explain your examples more. Coherence and cohesion. They did logically organize their information, and they did have some good connectives and, linking words, first of all, in other words, and conclusion. So, cohesion and coherence. I thought reasonably 6, they used paragraphs in the correct way. So that was reasonably good. Vocabulary. There were some issues with the vocabulary. So I would probably give 5.5 for the vocabulary. And the grammar, I think I've knocked down to a 5, just because there were several sentences that felt long, several phrases that felt incorrect. I had to put a lot of corrections in because the meaning, the candidate was not always expressing their meaning in the clearest, most understandable way. So I always say for IELTS, the most important thing is that your message is clear and understandable to the examiner. And then once you're confident in writing in shorter, simple, clearer sentences, then start bringing in the longer, more complex ones. Because sometimes you do what this candidate did and try to write a longer sentence, your meaning gets confused and gets muddled because you're not confident in how to write a clear, complex sentence. So that's one thing I would recommend that this candidate work on, is writing so that their meaning is very clear and practicing that. So I think overall this candidate comes out at a 5.5. I feel like there's a lot of room for improvement. I feel like this candidate has a lot of potential to get better. It was the issue of this conclusion and not explaining themselves properly in the third paragraph really let down their task achievement. And then also some of these longer sentences created an issue. So especially this first sentence here in paragraph 3 had a lot of grammar issues, so that sort of brought them down. So I think if they improved those two things, I think easily this could become a 6 or a 6+ essay. So those, I would just suggest that they work on that.